no one can read your messages or hear your calls except the people who have these special keys, because that's what the encryption key. Not even Facebook. We couldn't, even if we wanted to. Has something changed since this fact was written? I don't understand how they're able to say that they use end-to-end encryption in Messenger and then give over specific DMs like that.
History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
This is a story that we've all been aware of for a little while. Surprisingly, not getting nearly as much press as I think any of us would have expected, but it is revolving around two very important issues, I think, of the time we're living in. The privacy of data and what can be done with your data when it is being hosted by these large companies. And also, obviously, a huge one is the tenuous nature of abortion law. Well, I mean, it's not really tenuous at all. It's technically the law of the land that it's illegal, but there are different, circumstances that will allow for an abortion in some states. Basically, it's obviously being sent back to the states because of the overturning of the federal Roe versus Wade legislation case. So it's something that is not going to just solidify overnight, but we are starting to see cases kind of trickle through, showing some future very serious ramifications of this law. And I think Matt and Ben, we're all of the mind that this is something that will open the door to just folks in desperation doing unsafe things, potentially, if they're in need of an abortion and they can't get one legally. This is what we know about times before abortion was legal federally. People were using all kinds of horrific improvised methods and, going to underground clinics that were, at the very least sketchy and shady.
Yeah, Roe versus Wade, again, to be clear, I said this in the past, it's not an opinion, folks, it's a fact. Regardless of how you feel personally, Roe versus Wade being overturned does not illegalize abortion across the board. It effectively only illegalizes it for the poor. People who are privileged and well-to-do are going to still be able to get that procedure. And it's not going to change their lives in particular. This is to victimize the already disadvantaged.
I've seen it phrased very similar to what you just said, Ben. It doesn't outlaw abortion; it just outlaws safe abortion. So this case is a very kind of early example of two of those things kind of colliding: the idea of data privacy and security, and the idea of being prosecuted now for seeking an abortion or for taking matters into your own hands. And this case involves a young woman and her mother. In Madison County, Nebraska, a 41-year-old woman is now facing charges for helping her teenage daughter illegally abort a pregnancy, using, it would appear, like a morning after pill kind of situation. I haven't read the full court documents, but based on what I'm seeing in the reporting that's out there, it's that. And the reason that we know what we know about this is because the Facebook messages between the mother and her daughter, Jessica Burgess, by the way, is the mother, and the daughter is Celeste Burgess, are out there. And that's because Facebook, or Metas or whatever, gave them over to law enforcement, who were pursuing, prosecution of these two individuals. And what we have is a chain of communications between them, referring to, one pill stops the hormones, and then you have to wait 24 hours to take the other one. That sounds like either Plan B, right? Is it, or are there ones that you can take later? I thought there came a point where a pill would no longer do the trick. That sounds like a Plan B situation, but I'm not an expert. And then the mother writes, "Remember, we burn the evidence. I will finally be able to wear jeans." Which is an odd thing. I guess that's like, that's the daughter, excuse me, Celeste. So I guess she's referring to, hey, get my life back. There are some details in this story that are disturbing. They did report it as a miscarriage, and then the fetus was they disposed of it themselves, the mother and daughter, and they basically got someone else to help them do it. And then I think when they realized that the authorities were onto them, they like dug up the remains and tried to burn them, or they were talking about doing that. I mean, there are some very very disturbing details in here, but again, all of this comes from the fact that they couldn't just do it, properly. They couldn't just go to a clinic and do it. I don't think money is the issue here. This is literally like Nebraska has already been a state that for a long time has had very, very difficult, prohibitively difficult abortion laws. And this just made it even worse. So I'm bearing the lead here again. The fact of the matter is, and the big part of the story is that Facebook gave over these direct messages, these private messages between these two users, and they did it in response to a warrant. Meta's did come out with a statement to Motherboard, who did the initial reporting on this, saying nothing in the valid warrants we received from local law enforcement in early June prior to the Supreme Court decision mentioned abortion. The warrants concerned charges related to a criminal investigation, and court documents indicate that police at the time were investigating the case of a stillborn baby who was burned and buried, not a decision to have an abortion. Both of these warrants were originally accompanied by non-disclosure orders, which prevented us from sharing any information about them. The orders have now been lifted. Another Meta spokesperson tweeted, this is from the Motherboard article, an identical statement shortly before the company contacted Motherboard with this comment. So I don't know. This is really messy on so many levels. I really want to hear you guys' thoughts, because it does appear that the warrants were served before the Supreme Court decision was handed down, but that they handed over the messages after. The timeline's a little tricky.
Honestly, Meta's position in this case is that they are legally required to comply with those sorts of warrants. And that part, unfortunately, is true. I agree with you that the timeline is messy, and their statement regarding this has triggered this conversation about whether or not they knew they were giving police information about an alleged illegal abortion. But still, with that, you have to wonder, did they get the warrant and then just say, okay, we're giving profile info, we're giving DM info, but we're not reading it ourselves? Like, what's the process there? Because the argument seems to say that they themselves did not connect the dots between condemning this person, right, and just complying with a warrant. And again, it's an interesting argument, because as far as I can tell, they would be required, right, to comply with a warrant. You can't just say no.
Well, that was a question that I had, and Matt, I know you've brought stories to the table in the past, or definitely been something that I know has been on your radar, involving Apple and their end-to-end encryption when it comes to iMessage and like text messages between iPhone users, and they have what's called end-to-end encryption. And there was that whole story where there was that shooter, and the government was trying to petition Apple to like write like a back door, so they could get access to the guy's phone, because like Apple even can't do it if they don't have the password. And they were saying they wouldn't do it because it would like it could potentially like be a vulnerability for like all of their users. So I think that one was specifically about getting into his phone, but also like Facebook. I just found this page that says it describes what is end-to-end encryption, how does it work, and Facebook on their own website describes it as it adds extra security and protection to your messages and calls in a conversation, so that only you and whoever you're talking to can see it. And then it says, no one can read your messages or hear your calls except the people who have these special keys, because that's what the encryption key. Not even Facebook. We couldn't, even if we wanted to. Has something changed since this FAQ was written? I don't understand how they're able to say that they use end-to-end encryption in Messenger and then give over specific DMs like that when they say that they don't have the key.
That's a really good. That's a good question, but unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I don't.
Mhm.
I know. I've watched some really helpful videos on how end-to-end encryption works, and it is fascinating. And theoretically, that is correct. What you just read, where it would be physically impossible for someone to read those secured messages unless they had the specific keys, right? Because you need two keys to send it and read it. You need two keys to read it on either end, right?
Mhm.
It's really cool the way messages get sent. I think it's a lockbox example that you can find on YouTube right now, where I think we mentioned this on the show before. You can watch it online. It shows how if you put certain locks in like you've got three or four keys, I think, that actually are required to send a secure end-to-end message like that.
I think it's a feature. I think it's sort of like, having like private browsing in your Chrome, tabs. I think you have to like specifically set. I don't think all Facebook messages are end-to-end encrypted, because there's a section on this help center for Messenger that says secret conversations, and then it goes into all this stuff. And I think it's like a feature.
Here's what I'll add. You should assume that anything you do on the internet will one day become public knowledge. There is no real secrecy that you can safely assume. Even, honestly, yes, if you look at the nuts and bolts technically of a lot of end-to-end encryption, I'm a big fan. As you guys know, I'm always trying to get us to move our group chat to things like Signal or Telegram for these reasons, but you cannot assume, you simply cannot safely assume at this point that anything you do online is private.